Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Nicole Carlson, Executive Advisor at NEOGOV. Prior to this role, I spent almost 2 decades leading HR and local government. Local government is where I developed professionally. I've worked alongside public safety teams, supported city leadership through economic downturns, helped modernize systems, and navigated the real everyday complexities of serving a community with limited resources and very high expectations. What I learned during those years is this: workforce decisions are never theoretical in local government. They show up immediately. They show up in project delays, they show up in employee morale and workplace culture, and ultimately they show up in public trust. So today I want to talk about HR as a strategic partner, not as a trendy phrase, not as something that sounds good in a leadership meeting, but as something that's measurable and real. There's decades of research in strategic human resource management showing when HR systems are aligned with organizational strategy, performance improves. So what does that actually look like in a city or county? That's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to organize this conversation around several big areas, including what it means for HR to be strategic, how to connect with executive leadership, how to measure if we're making an impact, and what it all looks like specifically in local government. Because here's the reality: HR doesn't become strategic simply because we say it is. It becomes strategic when our systems are aligned and producing results. Research consistently shows that integrated HR systems, not isolated initiatives, are what drive stronger performance outcomes. So today isn't about adding more programs, it's about aligning what we already do. As we move through this, I invite you to think about your own organization. Where is HR already influencing strategy, and where is there an opportunity to improve that influence? Let's start with the foundation. What does it really mean for HR to be a strategic partner? I always pause when I hear the phrase seat at the table. The real question isn't whether HR has a seat, it's what we're contributing when we're actually at the table. Being strategic isn't about proximity, it's about impact. Research on high-performance work systems shows that organizations that align their HR practices, recruiting, compensation, training, performance management, as a cohesive system see stronger operational and financial performance. And that tells us something important. Strategy isn't one initiative, it's alignment. In local government, that might look like aligning recruitment efforts or adding additional positions with long-term infrastructure planning, or proactively reviewing compensation data when you have hard to fill roles. It's anticipating workforce challenges before they become emergencies. Strategic HR is asking questions like, what skills will we struggle to recruit in 5 years? Which departments have a high volume of upcoming retirements, and how can we help them prepare to navigate them? What do our employee evaluations reflect in regards to ongoing employee development? Being strategic doesn't mean doing more. It means connecting the dots between what we're already doing and where the organization is headed. It's a mindset shift from managing transactions to transforming the workplace. How do we connect workforce strategy to mission outcomes? In local government, mission is everything. We don't exist to generate a profit, we exist to serve our communities. So if HR is strategic, it must connect directly to service delivery. There's a well-established framework in research called AMO, ability, motivation, and opportunity. It essentially says performance improves when an employee has the right skills, the motivation to contribute, and the opportunity to do meaningful work. That framework translates beautifully into local government. Ability, are we hiring and developing the right skills and abilities? Motivation, are we supporting employees so they stay engaged and committed? And opportunity, are our systems enabling people to actually perform, or is the bureaucracy and outdated processes getting in the way? Research shows that when these elements align, operational performance improves. In practical terms, connecting workforce strategy to mission starts with identifying mission-critical roles. Not every vacancy carries the same weight. A vacancy in water treatment or public safety carries immediate operational risk. Strategic HR doesn't just track vacancy rates, it should also evaluate risk exposure. It partners with finance to understand long-term cost projections. It looks at overtime trends and asks, what's driving this? It looks at turnover and asks, why is this occurring and what operational consequences are we seeing? and it reframes workforce metrics in a mission language. Instead of saying turnover is at 14%, strategic HR should say, due to the high turnover in this department, overtime has increased by $55,000. It is not only impacting employee morale, but it is delaying inspections and impacting the services we provide to keep the community safe. Let's discuss how HR can help. That's when executive leaders start listening differently, because now HR isn't just reporting, HR is changing the conversation to advise. What capabilities must HR build to operate strategically? What does HR need in order to operate this way? There are 5 capabilities I consistently see in strong public sector HR teams. First, the ability to translate strategy into workforce implications. Having a pulse on what's going on in your organization and how it's impacting the people and services. Second, workforce planning discipline, looking beyond this year's vacancies to longer-term needs. Third, alignment across the entire talent lifecycle. Recruitment, onboarding, training, performance management, and retention shouldn't operate as isolated conversations. They're interconnected and should continuously reinforce one another. Fourth, analytics capability. Research shows that data and analytics strengthen HR's strategic contribution because it shifts decision-making from intuition to facts. And finally, change in leadership. Public sector organizations constantly navigate change. Economic cycles, elected officials, budgets, policy updates, technology modernization. HR is often at the center of those transitions. Strategic HR leaders are steady communicators. They provide clarity during uncertainty, and they build trust through consistency. And as we all know, trust in local government is everything. But that trust doesn't appear overnight. It's built intentionally over time through consistent investment in organizational needs. When strategy is present, HR moves from being reactive to proactive, from administrative to advisory. How do we measure whether HR is truly strategic? This is where credibility really solidifies. Research distinguishes between operational performance and financial outcomes and finds that aligned HR systems positively influence both. So data and measurements matter. Strategic HR looks at 3 levels: workforce indicators, time to fill, retention of critical roles, engagement drivers; operational indicators, overtime trends, absenteeism, delays in services provided; and financial or risk indicators, turnover, cost avoidance, reduced compliance exposure, increased injuries. But here's the key: we don't just report numbers, we interpret and connect them. We tell the story of what those numbers mean for the organization's ability to serve its community. When HR communicates in terms of improved operations, risk mitigation, fiscal stability, and service continuity, the perception shifts. We stop being viewed as the place where employees go when something's wrong, and we start creating value for our seat at the table. What does strategic HR leadership look like in government today? Public sector HR operates within governance structures, civil service systems, and public accountability frameworks. Research in public administration confirms that institutional conditions shape how our HR systems function, but constraints don't eliminate strategy. They make discipline more important. Strategic HR leadership today means modernizing thoughtfully by strengthening workforce visibility through better data and preparing leaders for complexity. It also means asking proactive questions instead of waiting for problems to escalate. Where are we exposed? What workforce risks are emerging? What does our talent pipeline look in the next 3 to 5 years? Strategic HR leaders elevate conversations and influence decisions before consequences appear. And ultimately, they ensure that workforce strategy strengthens community service. That's what strategic partnership looks like in local government. I'd love to open it up for questions. Where are you seeing opportunities to elevate HR's strategic role? What barriers are you encountering? What workforce risks are keeping you up at night? Let's talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. So as Nicole said, we're going to open it up for some Q&A. Now we have a number of questions in the chat to get through, but we do have an extended amount of time in this session dedicated to Q&A. So if you have questions, please continue putting them in the chat as we go, and I'll go ahead and get started. So the first question we have, Nicole, is what's the first step that HR can take to become more strategic in local government?
Perfect. Hello, everyone. That's a great first question. I would suggest that HR should start by connecting what you're already doing with the organization's priorities. Being strategic in HR isn't about necessarily creating new work. It's about aligning the work that you have with your organizational goals. So for example, I would suggest looking at your current efforts in things like recruiting and retention and performance management to determine how the data you have supports operations and potentially can reduce risk. Even small shifts like framing turnover in terms of service impact instead of percentages can change how leadership engages with your HR team.
Excellent. Next question that I have is, how can HR better communicate its impact to the executive leadership teams they work with?
Yeah, another great question. It's super important to connect how your workforce data impacts and relates to your organizational goals. Instead of reporting things like metrics and isolated reports, it's really important to connect your data to what leaders care about. Things like service deliverables, turnover, fiscal responsibility, or even risk reduction. For example, I would suggest not just reporting overtime data or overtime increases. It's more helpful to explain to your leaders how the overtime data is tied to things like staffing shortages or even potential burnout. And also explain to your leaders what could happen if we don't address something like that, right? When HR communicates in terms of operational impact, the conversation can shift from reporting to advising.
Nicole, what is one capability that HR teams should prioritize building within their organization so that they can operate more strategically?
Yeah, I think one super helpful topic for HR teams to focus on is workforce planning. Typically, HR can focus on immediate hiring needs, but if you're more strategic, you're looking 3 to 5 years out. So that means identifying roles related to retirements or even understanding hard to fill positions, and then aligning your talent pipelines for long-term organizational goals. If HR can anticipate challenges like that instead of reacting, it becomes a true strategic partner with operations.
Excellent. So the next question here is about local government nuance. I think this one was quite good. What is unique about trying to be strategic in a local government setting compared to the private sector? And how should HR best practices adjust for that nuance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think local government is unique because you have a variety of goals and interests, right? Public works and their goals and their operations are significantly different than something like public safety goals and operations. And so if HR can create good relationships with each of those groups and build trust and rapport with each work group, I think that is super helpful to, again, build those relationships, but also to understand their operations and then how your HR teams can best help them.
Awesome. Sort of continuing along the same line of questioning there, the next one is about workforce planning. So a lot of agencies struggle to move beyond reactive hiring. What kind of bullwhip effect does that have in workforce planning, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, I think if HR groups are always being reactive, you truly never feel like you're making progress or that you're necessarily being helpful to your operational teams. And so if you as an HR group or even with thought leaders in your organization can get together and say what is happening and what do we need to focus on in the next 1, 2, 3 years, and then put your heads together to come up with a plan, that is significant. Again, that constant reaction is draining to your energy, and it's very hard to feel like you're getting ahead. And so anything that you can do to help operations navigate those future challenges is a huge help.
Awesome. And the next question I have is around data and analytics, actually. So you talked about analytics being a key capability. What are the most important metrics HR should be focusing on to demonstrate strategic impact?
Yeah, I think that the data that's most important depends on what your organization is focusing on and what challenges you're currently dealing with. So maybe your organization is struggling with things like your time to hire is taking too long. And NEOGOV can provide great data on that, and you can use those tools to streamline your efforts and then track if you're improving or maybe staying stagnant. So again, I think it's just super important to understand what your organizational goals are, what your challenges are, and then focus on the data that relates to that first.
Excellent. What are some of the common barriers that you see that are preventing HR from stepping into a more strategic role? And then once we know what those are, how can teams begin overcoming them?
Yeah, I would say in my experience, one major challenge is that departmental leadership maybe doesn't see HR as a partner, and it can kind of be an oil and water resistance. I think that the more that you can do to show interest in each operation and meet with those leaders, meet with employees, and understand what is going on in their work groups, what work are they doing, why are they having challenges with filling positions, that sort of thing. You slowly build that trust and rapport, and that will help you in the future as you're trying to help them be more strategic and think ahead.
Excellent. This next question I really like. It's actually about change in leadership roles. So when organizations are going through a major change or a major shift, what role should HR be playing to help maintain stability and trust from that strategic partnership lens?
Yeah, I would say HR plays a huge role in that. As a local government, typically change is something that we're always dealing with, or we know that big change is coming, and so we can prepare for that. And so I would suggest that HR get involved in those conversations. So let's say you're doing a major software changeover in the next year. Start having conversations now as far as how you want to approach that with your employees, how you want to approach the marketing of that, how you want to approach the communication. And HR will likely come out as a key leader in that effort, but don't wait until that change is there or that change is starting tomorrow. Get ahead of it so you can feel like, again, you're not constantly reacting, that you're being very proactive and you have a good timeline and a good plan in place so that when employees do ask questions, you can say, here's what we've prepared in the last year. And again, that goes back to that building trust and rapport as well.
Excellent. Our next question is also sort of a risk reframing question. How can HR better communicate workforce risks? So this could be changing leadership or other things in a way that resonates with the agency and resonates with leadership.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as HR leaders or even risk leaders, we typically talk in our own language and maybe use acronyms or references that employees may not understand. And so I think one key element of good communication when you're talking to leaders is using language that they understand and not talking in your internal team language or your internal industrial language.
Excellent. So if we're looking ahead towards the future, what workforce trends should local government HR leaders be preparing for today or yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday, right? Again, workforce planning is huge, right? Understanding your current organizational needs and then what's happening in your community and organization that may impact HR. I think HR technology is ever changing. So again, always being mindful of tools and processes that are there to help you. And the other thing I think is just kind of having that human connection and maintaining that. We're in a world where everyone says AI is going to take over, but how are we maintaining those relationships and making sure that our employees feel psychologically safe to speak up and ask questions and bring up new ideas? And how are we maintaining that human connection?
Awesome. Speaking of human connections, the next question that I have is a very human one. So HR teams are often stretched very thin. Maybe it's the one thing we all have in common. How can leaders realistically balance the transactional demands with the strategy work that needs to be done?
That's a very good question. I think one exercise that I love to do with my HR team is evaluating where your time is going. And the more that you can understand where your time is going, you can determine if you are spending too much time on things that are irrelevant, right? As an organization, maybe things have evolved, but you're still doing an old report or you're still running data that is irrelevant. So again, just looking at where you're spending your time, and then as a team saying, do we really need to do this? Is there a better way that we could do this? And focusing on the organizational's goals. So much in HRs, everyone's wearing multiple hats and doing multiple things. And so if you can make sure that for your 8-hour day, you are spending your time on things that bring value versus that constant, what we've always done, you may feel like you're getting more ahead.
Awesome. Next question I have is for new HR leaders, actually. So for HR leaders who feel like they're not yet at that strategic business partner level, and maybe you're early in your career, what are some ways to build that credibility over time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say just involve yourself as much as you can in things that you may not think are necessarily relevant. Join committees, attend your council meetings or your commission meetings, but truly just absorb everything around you, because you will slowly be able to connect the dots. And having that institutional knowledge and knowledge of what's happening in your community is incredibly valuable to you as a HR representative. And I think that leaders in all departments will recognize that, including elected officials, that you are showing up and being curious, and that will slowly build that trust and rapport over time. But my advice would truly just be to be curious and soak up as much as you can.
Awesome. Next question I had was about partnership and strategic leadership between departments. So what does strong partnership between HR and departments like finance or operations actually look like when it's going well?
That's a great question. I would say it looks like, again, that curiosity factor, just having a good relationships with payroll and IT. In my role, we actually had bi-weekly meetings with our payroll team just to talk about what's going well, what's coming up that we need to be prepared for. But I think, we can get stuck in our day-to-day, and when things are going well, maybe not communicate with those other support groups. But if you can create a way where you're maintaining that internal support and that internal connection, when things go wrong, you're already 10 steps ahead.
Fabulous. So next question kind of leans into maybe AI as part of the answer, which you mentioned briefly already, but how should HR leaders be thinking about technology and systems when they're trying to become more strategic?
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I think you have to go back to what does the organization, what are they focusing on, and where can HR best support? HR technology, including AI, again, is ever evolving. And so I think HR can really be the forefront of making change if you understand what's happening in your organization, and you can make suggestions to say, I think our organization needs this tool, needs to go down this path, because based on the roadmap that we have, I know it will help us, maybe not immediately, but it'll help us in 1 to 3 years.
Fantastic. So next question is about progress and when you know you're headed in the right direction. So what are some early signs that an HR team is successfully shifting from reactive to this more strategic motion, even before like the big flashy results show up?
Yeah, I would say one big thing that HR can pay attention to and would demonstrate that you are building that rapport and that trust is you are having more connections organically with leaders. So maybe leaders are calling and asking you for help, or they're calling and saying, I'm not sure what to do with this employee. I'm not sure what to do with this turnover issue. Can we get together and brainstorm and talk about it? But I think before you have hard data, or you have, big increases or decreases in those analytics, truly just knowing that your leaders throughout the organization are connecting with your HR team, and it is becoming more collaborative and more of a partnership, is a great sign that you're on the right path.
Excellent. And then final question that I have, I saved for the end because it was a good closer, is if you could give one piece of advice to HR leaders who are trying to elevate their role, what would you tell them?
Okay, I'm gonna give two, because I think that's hard. I'd say one, be patient with yourself, right? Time takes time and learning takes time. But I would go back to truly being curious and collecting all the dots, right? Every experience you have, you may not understand how it will connect in the future, but if you're always collecting dots, at some point they will connect, and that could be a year out and that could be 10 years out. But the more you are experiencing, the more well-rounded you become, the more knowledgeable you become, and the more you can add value to your team and to your organization.
Excellent. Thank you all for these questions. This was a really fun Q&A, so keep them coming. I really appreciate the perspectives that you were able to share with us today, Nicole, and I know everyone here on the call does as well. If there's one thing I hope everyone takes away, it's that strategic HR isn't something that is separate from the work that you're already doing. But as Nicole said, it's about alignment, it's about visibility, it's about connecting your personal efforts to the outcomes your organizations care about the most. And luckily, these conversations don't need to stop here at this webinar. If you're interested in continuing to explore what this looks like in practice, we are actually hosting a virtual customer event where you can get together with your peers, hear from folks like Nicole, and see how other agencies are approaching their workforce strategy and get more hands-on with these things. So the conference is Fuel, and registration for it is actually opening today. So come in, register. The event will be April 28th and 29th, and we really can't wait to see you there. It's such a great opportunity to go deeper, share challenges, and walk away with some practical strategies like Nicole shared with us today that you can bring back to your organization. So thank you so much for joining us and spending your time with us today, and for all that you do to support your communities. We truly appreciate it, and we hope to see you at Fuel. Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.